In today's video, we'll examine the troubling stories of mass murderers who received the death penalty. We'll discuss their executions, final words, and last meals. Corey Johnson. State, Indiana. Date of execution, January 14, 2021. Corey Johnson was an American convicted killer and co-founder of a Virginia substance trafficking gang who murdered 7 people in 1992. This was to increase the gang's substance trade monopoly in Richmond, Virginia. Johnson and 2 members of his gang were found guilty under a federal law that targets large-scale substance traffickers. He was sentenced to death for each of the 7 counts of murder he was tried for. On January 14, 2021, shortly after the loss of his final appeal, 52-year-old Corey Johnson was put to death by lethal injection at the USP Terre Haute. After receiving a dose of pentobarbital, Johnson, who declined to say any last words, was pronounced dead at 11:34 p.m. Johnson ordered a pizza, jelly-filled donuts, and a strawberry milkshake for his last meal. However, he only received the pizza and strawberry milkshake but did not get the donuts. In a statement issued after his execution, Johnson expressed that he was deeply remorseful of his actions and wanted each of his victims, whom he addressed by their names, to be remembered. He apologized to the families of the people he killed back in the late 90s. Johnson also briefly commented on his last meal in his last written statement, describing his pizza and strawberry shake as wonderful, but lamented that he did not get the jelly-filled donuts he asked for, stating that this should be fixed. Derek Ryan Dearman. State, Alabama. Date of execution, October 17, 2024. On August 20, 2016, a tragic mass killing took place in Citronelle, Alabama, claiming the lives of 5 individuals, including a woman who was 5 months pregnant. The incident occurred in a private home located in a rural area west of the city. The victims were Chelsea Marie Reed, 22 years old, Shannon Melissa Randall, 35-year-old, Robert Lee Brown, Justin Caleb Reed, and 26-year-old Joseph Adam Turner. After brutally and viciously murdering the victims with multiple weapons, Derek Ryan Dearman surrendered himself to the Greene County Sheriff's Office in Mississippi the following day. In September 2018, Dearman pleaded guilty to capital murder and kidnapping. During the jury trial, Dearman was found guilty of 6 counts of capital murder and first-degree kidnapping. The jury approved the death sentence, which the court confirmed on October 12, 2018. On September 3, 2024, the Alabama Supreme Court approved the death warrant of Dearman, and he was executed on October 17, 2024. His last words were, "Forgive me. This is not for me. This is for you," he said to the victims' families. "I've taken so much." He told his family, "Y'all already know I love y'all." Derek Ryan Dearman's last meal was a seafood platter from a local restaurant. Dustin Lee Honkin. State, Indiana. Date of execution, July 17, 2020. Dustin Honkin was executed for the murder of 5 people that occurred in 1993. Prosecutors also said he killed key witnesses to stop them from testifying in his substance case. He received a lethal injection at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. His lawyers contended he had dementia and didn't know why he was being executed. However, his execution proceeded without delay on July 7, 2024. Mr. Honkin was pronounced dead at 4:36 p.m. His final words were the poem first published by Jared Manley Hopkins, S.J., an English poet and a Jesuit priest, titled Heaven Haven. He said, "I have desired to go, where springs not fail, to fields where flies no sharp and sighted hail, and a few lilies blow. And I have asked to be where no storms come, where the green swell is in the havens dumb, and out of the swing of the sea." After the recitation, he went silent. Leonard Taylor, State, Missouri. Date of execution, February 8, 2023. Leonard Taylor is a Missouri death row prisoner who was convicted of "We live eternally in the hearts of our family and friends. From Allah we come, and to Allah we all shall return. Everybody will get their turn to die. Death is not your enemy, it is your destiny. Look forward to meeting it. Peace." He was served a last meal of a seafood platter, cheeseburger, French fries, cheesecake, and vanilla ice cream. Joseph Edward Corcoran, State, Indiana. Date of execution, December 18, 2024. Joseph Edward Corcoran was an American who was well known as a convicted mass murderer. He became a grim figure in the annals of criminal history after his execution for a heinous quadruple homicide in Indiana. Corcoran's case revolves around a tragic incident that occurred in 1997 when he was found guilty of murdering 4 individuals: his own brother, his sister's fiancé, and 2 of their close friends, all within the confines of his home in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The events leading to these murders shed light on the turmoil within his family life. The justice system responded firmly, and in 1999, Corcoran was sentenced to death, reflecting the gravity of his actions and the profound impact they had on the community and the victims' families. However, this was not the first time Corcoran faced serious legal consequences. Years prior, in 1992, he was charged with the murder of his parents when he was only 17. However, he was acquitted of all the charges. This earlier incident painted a troubled picture of Corcoran's life, raising questions about his mental state and the circumstances that may have contributed to his violent behavior. The duality of his criminal history makes his case particularly disturbing, as it reveals a pattern of violence that ultimately culminated in his execution. Corcoran, who had since exhausted all avenues of appeal against his sentence, was executed on December 18, 2024, by lethal injection at the Indiana State Prison. He was pronounced dead at 12:14 a.m. Central Standard Time, 8 minutes after he received a single dose of pentobarbital. Corcoran requested ice cream from Ben & Jerry's for his last meal. He was granted a final meeting with his family, including his wife, Tahina, whom he married while in prison. His last words were, "Not really. Let's get this over with." Arthur Brown, State, Texas. Date of execution, March 9, 2023. The Brownstone Lane murders represent a tragic and chilling event that unfolded in Houston, Texas, on June 20, 1992. On that day, 3 men carried out a violent act that left a lasting impact on the community and raised numerous questions about safety and justice. The assailants, Marion Butler Dudley, Arthur Squirt Brown Jr., and Antonia Tony Lamoni Dunson, targeted a residence on Brownstone Lane, where they tied up 6 individuals before committing their heinous crime. In a brutal and calculated attack, the perpetrators shot all 6 victims in the head, resulting in the deaths of 4. Following a thorough investigation, Dudley, Brown, and Dunson were apprehended and brought to trial. The court proceedings revealed details of their motives and the planning behind the murders, which were rooted in gang-related activities and personal grievances. The intense media coverage highlighted both the pain of the victims' families and the community's outrage over the violence. Ultimately, the 3 men were convicted of capital murder. Dudley and Brown received the harshest punishment, death sentences that reflected both the brutality of their crime and the state's stance on capital punishment. Dunson, on the other hand, was sentenced to life in prison, a decision that prompted discussions about the differences in sentencing for co-conspirators based on their roles in the crime. Brown maintained his innocence till his last breaths, claiming the courts and prosecutors blocked him from evidence that proved he did not murder that night. In his last words, he said, "What is occurring here tonight is not justice. It's murder of an innocent man for a murder that occurred in 1992. Brown said on the death gurney, according to prison officials. My co-defendant was executed in 2006, and if I'm innocent, he was innocent, and they killed an innocent man, and the state doesn't want the truth to come out. He added, tonight, Texas will kill a second innocent man for a murder that occurred in 1992. I have no further words. After his speech, he was injected with a lethal dose of pentobarbital at 6:20 p.m. He was pronounced dead 17 minutes later. There was no record of a last meal. Gilbert Postel. State: Oklahoma. Date of execution: February 17, 2022. Gilbert Ray Postel was an American mass murderer who was sentenced to death and executed for his involvement in a quadruple murder in Oklahoma. He was executed on February 17, 2022, by lethal injection. On May 30, 2005, Postel, his brother David Postel, his father Brad Postel, and another man, Randall Wade Bias, shot and killed 4 people in a blitz attack at a home in Oklahoma City. Donnie Swindle, James Alderson, Terry Smith, and Amy Wright were the victims. Before the attack, Brad Postel was involved in a motorcycle crash and was seriously injured, receiving a brain injury that resulted in seizures. The shooting hit his system. There's no record of his last meal. Donnie Cleveland Lance. State: Georgia. Date of execution: January 29, 2020. Donnie Cleveland Lance was an American convicted murderer who was executed by the state of Georgia on January 29, 2020. He was convicted of killing his ex-wife, Sabrina Lance, and her boyfriend, Dwight Wood, Jr. Lance was sentenced to death by lethal injection on June 23, 1999. On January 7, 2020, an execution date was set between January 29, 2020, and February 5, 2020. It was then scheduled for January 29, 2020, at 7 p.m. He was pronounced dead at 9:05 p.m. Lance declined to make a final statement and said no when asked if he wanted a final prayer. His last meal consisted of 2 chili steak burgers, French fries, onion rings, mustard, ketchup, and a soda. He was the second person to be executed in the United States in 2020 and the 76th person to be executed by the state of Georgia. Alan Miller. State: Alabama. Date of execution: September 26, 2024. The execution of Alan Eugene Miller took place in the U.S. state of Alabama. It was the second execution in both the world and the state to use this particular method, following the execution of Kenneth Eugene Smith in January 2024. Miller was convicted of the August 1999 murders of 3 men in Pelham, Alabama, and was sentenced to death in 2000. On August 5, 1999, Miller, armed with a .40 caliber Glock pistol, shot and killed 2 of his co-workers, 32-year-old Lee Holdbrooks and 28-year-old Christopher Yancey, at a heating and air conditioning distributor. He then drove 5 miles to a business where he had previously worked and shot his former supervisor, 39-year-old Terry Jarvis. Holdbrooks was shot 6 times, Yancey was shot 3 times, and Jarvis was shot 5 times. After the shooting, Miller drove off, only to be pulled over later that day on the side of an Alabama highway after being spotted by police. It required 4 officers and 4 sets of handcuffs to subdue him. According to trial testimony, Miller's supposed motive behind the murders was that he believed the men were spreading rumors about him being gay. A psychiatrist hired by Miller's defense found he suffered from severe mental illness. Miller was executed by nitrogen hypoxia at the Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama, on September 26, 2024. He was pronounced dead at 6:38 p.m. local time. For his last meal, he had a hamburger steak, a baked potato, and French fries. His final words were, "I didn't do anything to be in here." Nathaniel Woods. State, Alabama. Date of execution, March 5, 2020. The execution of Nathaniel Woods occurred on March 5, 2020, at Holman Correctional Facility in Alabama. The execution was controversial due to beliefs of his innocence, skepticism about his culpability, and the fairness of his trial. Woods had surrendered inside a crack house during a police raid that attempted to serve a months-old arrest warrant on Woods. Another man came downstairs and opened fire, killing 3 officers. Woods ran from the scene after the gunfire erupted. Despite never pulling a trigger, Woods was accused of being an accomplice and was convicted of capital murder. The same jury voted 10-2 in favor of capital punishment. Hours before Woods's death, the United States Supreme Court temporarily halted the execution, but later denied a stay. Nathaniel Woods was executed at Holman Correctional Facility by lethal injection at 9:01 p.m. on March 5, 2020. He did not make a final statement. For his last meal, Woods requested sweet potatoes, spinach, a chicken patty, a chicken leg, cooked apples, fries, 2 oranges, and an orange-flavored drink. He ate just 1 bite of the chicken leg. Daniel Lewis Less. State, Indiana. Date of execution, July 14, 2020. Daniel Lewis Lee was an American white supremacist, neo-Nazi, and convicted felon. In 1999, Lee was convicted as an accomplice to Chevy Kehoe in the 1996 murders of William Frederick Muller, Nancy Ann Muller, and their young daughter Sarah Elizabeth Powell during a robbery at their Arkansas home. The murders were committed as part of a plot to establish a white ethnostate. While Kehoe was found guilty of the triple murder in a separate trial and was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without parole, Lee was sentenced to death. He had previously served prison time for assisting his cousin in the 1999 murder of Joey Wavra. Daniel Lewis Lee was executed in the first federal execution in 17 years after the Supreme Court issued an overnight ruling that it could proceed. Lee was pronounced dead by the coroner at 8:07 a.m. ET in Terre Haute, Indiana. His last words were, "I didn't do it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm not a murderer. You're killing an innocent man." John Ballantyne. State, Texas. Date of execution, February 8, 2023. Ballantyne, a 54-year-old black man, was sentenced to death for shooting 3 male teenagers in the head while they slept in a home Ballantyne had previously shared with his ex-girlfriend. One of the victims was his ex-girlfriend's brother, who had disapproved of the couple's interracial relationship and previously threatened Ballantyne in a dispute that grew racist. Ballantyne did not recognize the other 2 victims. A jury found him guilty of capital murder in 1999. In his last statement, Ballantyne said, "I want to thank y'all. I love y'all for supporting me. I want to apologize for the wrong I did to y'all. Forgive me. I'm ready." He was pronounced dead at 6:36 p.m. There was no record of his last meal. Stephen Barbie. State, Texas. Date of execution, November 16, 2022. Barbie was a disabled man who was convicted for the murders of his pregnant ex-girlfriend and her child. However, his execution was delayed because of his disabled body. He was unable to straighten his arms. However, this didn't change the court's verdict. Reporters walked into the prison around 6 p.m., signaling the execution was about to begin. But for an hour and 40 minutes, no one came back out, causing anti-death penalty protesters outside to grow worried that something had gone wrong. It is uncommon for executions to last more than an hour. Barbie was pronounced dead at 7:35 p.m., nearly an hour and a half after he was strapped into the death chamber's gurney. John Hummel. State, Texas. Date of execution: 30th of June, 2021. On December 17, 2009, John stabbed his 34-year-old wife, Joy Hummel, 35 times. The former Marine also beat to death his daughter, Jody Hummel, and his wheelchair-bound father-in-law, Clyde Bedford, using a baseball bat. He then set their home, in the Fort Worth suburb of Kennedale, on fire. Hummel initially told police that he was not at home when the fire occurred and fled to California. He was arrested on December 20th that year after Customs and Border Protection stopped him when he presented himself for entry into the U.S. at the crossing between Tijuana, Mexico, and San Isidro, California. Hummel later confessed to the killings. According to prosecutors, Hummel, who was working as a hospital security guard, killed his family because he wanted to be with a woman who was a clerk in a convenience store. During his trial, prosecutors presented evidence that Hummel had tried to kill his family on a previous occasion by putting rat poison in their dinner. That plan was thwarted when the family threw away the meal, assuming it had gone bad. Hummel, strapped to the death chamber gurney, said a brief prayer that ended with him saying he would, "I will be with Jesus when I wake." "I truly regret killing my family," he said, then thanked friends for their prayers and support. "I love each and every one of you," he said. Ernest Johnson. State: Missouri. Date of execution: October 5, 2021. Ernest Lee Johnson was an American criminal convicted and executed for the murder of 3 convenience store employees in Boone County, Missouri, in 1994. Johnson's execution by lethal injection proved controversial, as a 2008 surgery had removed up to 20% of his brain tissue, leaving Johnson permanently cognitively disabled. Johnson died by lethal injection at 6:11 p.m. on October 5, 2021, at the Eastern Reception, Diagnostic and Correctional Center Prison in Bonne Terre, Missouri. He read a written last statement aloud, apologizing for his actions, reiterating his love for his friends and family, and thanking those who had prayed on his behalf. As the injection began, he mouthed unknown words to his relatives. Johnson was formally pronounced dead 9 minutes after receiving an injection of pentobarbital. In his last written statement, Johnson said he was sorry and have remorse for what I did. He said he loved his family and friends and thanked those who prayed for him. Johnson's last meal consisted of 2 double bacon cheeseburgers, onion rings, large strawberry milkshakes, and a large pizza. Garcia Glenn White. State: Texas. Date of execution: October 1, 2024. Garcia Glenn White was an American murderer, rapist, and serial killer. He was convicted and sentenced to death for the 1989 triple murder of a woman and her 2 teenage daughters in Houston, Texas, and is also the prime suspect in 2 additional murders with which he was never charged. White was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit on October 1, 2024, at the age of 61. In his last words, he said, "I apologize, and I pray that you can find peace, comfort, and closure in your heart for the wrong I have done and the pain I have caused you, and anybody else I've caused pain to." If you like the way we create these videos, and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, kindly hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives.